Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on embracing open source at the Royal Marsden NHS Foundation Trust, implementing an innovative finance system whilst reducing cost. My name is Lisa Robertson. I'm a Policy and Research Manager here at the HFMA, and I'm going to be chairing this session for you this afternoon. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Patrick Highland. He's the Programme Manager, Technology and Innovation at the Royal Marsden NHS Foundation Trust. Before I hand over to Patrick to give us his session, just a couple of bits of housekeeping. I really want to get as interactive as possible in this workshop. I know we're online and not in the room today, but if you can ask your questions as they occur to you in the box, that would be brilliant. You can ask the question by typing in the chat tab, and I'll put the questions to Patrick at the end of the session. You can access the slides for this session via the reception page on the left-hand side. And if you have any technical problems during the session, you can contact the HFMA Help Desk by visiting the Expo tab and then clicking Help Desk. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Patrick. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for that great introduction. It's a real privilege to be here today. I realise I'm in the graveyard shift, and I hope everyone's still awake, but I'll do my best to keep it moving along. So, as Lisa said, this is about open source, an open source initiative that we ran at the Royal Marsden, and I really hope you get something out of today. I realise it's a sponsored session, but what I hope you see is it's a story more about a shared belief in the power of technology to benefit everyone, rather than a straight sales pitch. So, let's Ben, if you can just move me onto page 1, that would be fantastic. So I'm not sure in the audience how many people are aware of what open source is. So I think it's probably useful for me to just give a quick overview of what it is exactly. So it's code that can be reused and reused by anyone. It can be published, and you can add to it, make improvements to it. But the important thing to remember is that although it's licensed, it's not a cost license. It's a license for use. So open source, I think the most important thing to understand is that this is ubiquitous. We use it every day. If you are using a browser, if you're using an Android phone, IBM products, single sign-on that perhaps we all use every day. This is all open source technology. It isn't the realm of a backroom hack developing code. And I think that's really important to remember and bear in mind. This is used by, and you can see in the slide there, the likes of Facebook, Google, NHS Digital have its own program for open source. Gov.uk, it's an open source first policy for software implementation. And what makes it really special? And you might wonder why the likes of IBM, Oracle, Microsoft use it. It allows them to access expertise that they don't employ. It widens their pool of talent. So we all have very common problems within software development, or even as a business. They're not everyone's on your payroll. So using an open source model allows you to access that talent pool that's much wider than the reach that you have on your payroll. And for a finance, from a HFMA point of view, why use open source? Well, I can consume it, and I don't have a chargeable license. And for a value for money proposition, that's very powerful. Ben, next page, please. So let's set the scene. Why did we look at open source? Well, we had a pharmacy system that was run for us by a third party. That existing arrangement was coming to an end. Along with their exit went all of the back office systems. So primarily our financial reporting and operational systems disappeared. The limiting factor in all of this is that we had 2 to 3 months from the point of which we embarked on this to deliver a system capable of replacing all of that infrastructure and integrating it into the business. So it was quite a challenge. And rather than outsource again, from an executive point of view, we decided to set up RM Medicines, which was a subsidiary to run our pharmacy services. So that's what it would be. It would be a system that would enable RM Medicines to run the pharmacy services and replace the third party. So Ben, next slide, please. So the goals, the goals and aims weren't dissimilar from most financial organisations and requirements. And for a relatively small user base, remember, we aren't talking about thousands of people. It was a simple operational model, and therefore value for money became a real key driver. You don't want to invest hundreds of thousands of pounds on in a system that is relatively simple and not difficult to run or implement. My knowledge of open source from personal knowledge and interest led me personally to see this as an opportunity to use open source to develop a system that would not only benefit us, but actually could be reused throughout the NHS. So just as we were talking about open source technology and components of technology are used and reused through the likes of Oracle and Microsoft, actually, if I can develop an open source finance system or an ERP, which this is, there's benefits not just to my own organisation, but to every NHS organisation. That's a real cost saving, and it can be flexed accordingly. It doesn't increase in cost, it doesn't decrease in cost. It is just there available for you to use. What did I want? I wanted a system that could replace everything that I'd lost. I needed real-time financial management information. I needed it to integrate with with other applications in the business. And I wanted my accountants to be able to see transactional level detail and to model the data that they were seeing for forensics and variance analysis. So those are fairly simple goals, but with an ambitious objective to develop something that can be reused throughout the NHS. Ben? So, and I think this is key. Why do we choose open source? Certainly for the situation that we're talking about, proprietary solutions, they're either bundled with a lot of back office services and features, application features that weren't required. It could take too long to implement because they are large and unwieldy. Very often the contracts on which they're based are volumetric. So my baselines around processing maybe invoices or the number of users that I've got, and they will impact your contract, not just at the time of signing, but over time. If your business increases, those volumetric baselines will incur a concurrent increase in cost. I wanted to avoid that. So if I can avoid all of those things, which are all decreasing the value for money proposition, I'm achieving my objective. So my solution here was to leverage an open source platform. It's scalable, it can evolve, it can change. It's customizable to meet my specific requirements. It's not unwieldy, it won't come with the features and functionality that I don't require. It's certainly not constrained by any contractual requirements that will change my cost on a recurrent basis. And more importantly, because of that streamlined approach, I can reduce my implementation time and the costs. And it says it's there without vendor lock-in. So I am not tied through an open source license to a specific vendor. We can talk about that a little bit later, but essentially I can run and own the system myself. I can go out to any third party that understands the programming language in which it's based to help me with it or to develop it. But as it stands at the moment, I've created a system which isn't tied to a vendor or any vendor's development trajectory, and I can use it in perpetuity. So Ben, next slide, please. So where do we go to next? This is my journey. So of course I'd done my research, and I came across this white paper. It was published by NHS Digital, and in conjunction with Stuart McIntosh from the CEO of Opus VR. And if you ever get a chance to read it, I recommend it to you. It's a compelling read and explores the role that open source can take, not just in everyday life, but specifically for the NHS. And having read that, I contacted Stuart, and we met. And I'm not saying the stars aligned, but certainly our vision of what of technology with the NHS did, and our view of open source and how it could be used and to benefit everyone, certainly aligned. And I very much without trying to sound pretentious, the NHS is a very altruistic organisation, and it's care at the point of need, and it's free at the point of need, and certainly you'll find an awful lot of open source developers and work streams. You're developing technology to benefit people. You're not necessarily looking for a fiscal bump, a return on that. And I know just from having spoken to Stuart that his own personal philosophy also reflected mine in that respect. So, to develop a system that is free to use and consume, that really resonated with both of us, and certainly for me within the NHS. And it gave me the opportunity to explore a little bit further with Stuart. How could we achieve that? I think the next slide, Ben, if you can just bring that up, sort of brings us onto the technology. Now, we've talked about it already, haven't we? I had 2 to 3 months, and I'm talking about coding. I'm not saying that we started from scratch on a blank piece of paper. That would be crazy. But through research and through talking to Stuart, there is already an enterprise resource platform out there, and it's called Odoo. And at the time, back in 2019, I think when we started this, there weren't many open source ERPs that really fitted my requirements. I needed this to have a history, a roadmap for development. I needed it to be backed by a commercial organization that I knew wasn't going to fold. It was a collective of people that would ensure the stability and the continuity of a product. So Odoo, this isn't an advert for Odoo, but just to give you a sense of, it isn't a backroom organization. It has 5 million users worldwide. It's used by the very small to large corporations of over 300,000. So the point being that Odoo was based upon the principles of open source, and it releases a community edition of its product. It's actively maintained by thousands of developers, and it has annual releases of new features and functionality. The basis of it as well is Python. Python isn't an esoteric language. It's something that we learned at school. I didn't. I'm too old, but I think lots of people did and do now. So again, it's not something that's tied down to a few people that understand how it works or how it functions. This is a known programming language, and the community edition of Odoo was something that Opus VR introduced me to. They are experts in, and it formed the basis of the open source fork for the NHS Odoo ERP. It's also important, I think, just to mention there that although I said it's got annual releases, from a security perspective, it's run no different to any other large technology organization. There are regular patch updates, and they are automated. They're unattended, and these happen on a frequent basis. I can't remember exactly how frequently now, but I have a feeling it. I won't lie to you, but it's not once a year. It's it's monthly, weekly. So it's a very secure environment, and it's also a very intuitive application. you'd understand. It's a bit like going onto Amazon. You can click something and it'll work. You can explore yourself. So that's what we based our solution on. So Ben, next slide, please. So we embarked on it, and within 2 or 3 months, and it was a fairly intense 2 or 3 months. I won't lie to you. We created this new fork, and it delivered what we expected it to. Within 3 months, it was processing transactions in a live environment. It has an AP, accounts payable, has accounts receivable. It's got general ledger. It's got fixed assets. We implemented a making tax digital a module, so we can automate our submissions. We created an interface with our banking solution. We created a system that provided access to our data in real time. The most important thing that I wanted to do was just also improve our productivity. So where we had our JAC or WellSky pharmacy system, I didn't want to take data and start integrating it manually into our solution. I wanted that to be a seamless back-end integration. And again, through the creation of the use of APIs, that is something we managed to achieve. So it's a hands-off approach to importing data and then being able to consume it from an MI point of view, or as accountants, interrogate it for variance analysis and understand and compare against budget. So again, it's fully customizable. The chart of accounts is something that we defined. It wasn't defined for us. It's adaptable. It can be changed at will. Our hierarchy, we had a hierarchy in there, our organizational hierarchy. Again, that was something that was custom built for us, but it's a framework that can be used for anybody. So the detail within that framework can be different per organization. Consequently, although yes, it was for Royal Marsden, and the specific integration points for WellSky were pertinent to us, the core of that product can be used by anyone in the NHS. If you're buying something, if you're selling something, if you're having to report MI in a specific way, you can do it. This will give you the structure and the basis for your financial reporting needs. And dare I say it again, it's license free. This isn't something that you can necessarily be charged for. You can download it for yourself. So I think the point I'm making here is that within a very short space of time, with the help of OpenSPL, we met our requirements and we delivered an open source ERP that is now out there and available and still being used 2 years later within our organization. I think probably the next step, which would be interesting, is I'd love to be able to show it to you live, but of course it's got sensitive information. So on the next few slides, I've just got some screenshots of what it looks like. I know that's really tiny, but this is our making tax module. Hopefully you can see in here that it enables us at the click of a button to submit our VAT return. There's nothing else other than calculations that occur in the background based upon the transactions that the system has processed, and they are submitted to HMRC, and the system itself will manage that process. It records whether it's been received. It also gives us a report back to tell us that it's been delivered in its totality, and that it's fully auditable. But this is quite an interesting one, because it shows that this is something that Odoo itself as an application didn't have, but because it's open source, we're able to look at the code and we're able to develop that specific requirement that was required by the NHS. Next slide, please. Again, I could go on ad infinitum looking at specific features. But I know one of the things that we often do is journaling within accounts. One of the great features of Odoo that we've gotten here is the ability to import data, not just through the back end, but through the front end. So what I'm showing you here is an example of a journal that was in Excel, and it has a feature to navigate to that file, suck it up into Odoo, and you can do a dry run with it, and you can test it. You can validate against the fields that you're trying to import to whether or not it's successful. It's all built into the system. There's no macros going on in Excel. It's all based within the system itself, and which is a really powerful feature. So, but it's not just Excel. If you have a text file, you have a CSV file, you can use it to import data into your system seamlessly, and it's and it's user defined. The fields are user defined. You could use this for many things, but I think the typical use case is journal importing. Ben, next slide, please. This is just a view of our I suppose it's our TV, but by period is pivoted. So when we're talking about real data insights and real-time data insights, this is one version of that. It's very statistical, but of course it does have graphical modeling views as well. So if you wanted tables or graphs, you can do that. What I'm showing you here is us drilling down, so it's really small for me, into against our hierarchy, our organizational hierarchy, then into our subjective codes, and then you can go even further. You can look at the specific user. Any of the numbers on the right within the pivot you can click on, and it will take you direct to the source of that entry. So it's very intuitive because you can just press and click, and you can follow your nose, which I think is sometimes missing from a lot of systems. And you can drill back up, so you can drill down and come back up to your source, and it's very, very simple to use. Next page, please, Ben. So yeah, well, where do we go from here? I think this was designed almost not just to satisfy my own requirements within the Royal Marsden, but as a proof of concept for me that open source could be used within the NHS to save all of us money at the end of the day. This is a blank canvas. We've started filling in some of the blanks, and we've created the accounting system, but it's not to say that none of you can participate. You absolutely can. That system, it is there as a canvas for us all to work with and to develop, and as regulatory requirements change, we can all benefit from the input that we can all put into it. There are cost savings to be made. I'm not saying in every situation, but certainly it's possible for the NHS to use this to move from a proprietary technology and implement a free and open source solution that I think we've demonstrated in the Marsden does actually work and can work and work successfully. And I think it's just saying there that the objectives that we set at the beginning, we did actually manage to achieve, but those are just 3 of them. If I start looking at the system, there's so much extensibility that's there. If I wanted to put in project accounting, you could look at that. If you wanted to look at some of the human resource aspects of it, this is an ERP system, don't forget. We can do that. It can be integrated. I know during the pandemic, there was a real constraint on resources, nursing resources, clinical resources. I did look at an e-rostering solution based upon the same principles and the same product, that actually we could pool our resources and have an ecosystem of applications that could be interoperable across the NHS, and it would facilitate a lot of data sharing, a lot of knowledge sharing, and be done without necessarily incurring a license fee. Next page, please, Ben. So I think we probably talked about this. The solution is out there, and if you want to, you can go and download it. There is an opportunity, I've talked about it, for defining our own roadmap. There is an NHS organisation, it's called a PERTA, an NHS Digital use it, and it can act as a custodian for the gold source of an open source product. So if we all wanted to use it and contribute to it, they are there as a custodian. They're there to make sure that it doesn't become rogue, and that there's nothing malicious or unwanted in that model. So, you know, there is also, what I'm saying is, a mature model out there for using open source technology within the NHS that exists today. We don't have to start from scratch. There is, you know, the third bullet point there. It still costs you money to develop new things, but you only spend $1 once. And if we all contributed a small part of that for a feature that we all want to use, then the cost to ownership is incredibly small. And we can improve this incrementally over time. Again, our value for money proposition increases. Ben, next slide. Again, we've talked about it. It's cost effective. I can automate processes through bespoke development. I'm not talking about robotic process automation, more about data automation. And it's free for us to determine how we want to use it and what features and enhancements we want. And you know, as a community, you know, an NHS community, I think this presents an opportunity for us to do things slightly differently and for an improved, you know, cash envelope. I think next slide. I'll go one last. So again, this isn't just me. I think it is widely available. I've put there right in the middle the source code. So it's not just it's not flannel. If you want to go and have a look, and if you want to download it, you can start using it. And I would encourage you to just even go and have a look at it out of curiosity, because I think you'll find it a really intuitive system to use, and it certainly is it's a nice interface, a nice user experience. But again, you can also get OpenSVL's input to it, and they are on G-Cloud and other frameworks. So again, they're compliant with any of our procurement sort of constraints, and I think that probably gets me to the half an hour. Again, I hope you've really got something from this. I'm fascinated by it. I think it's a really interesting proposition for the NHS and just for society in general, the use of open source to realise adventures and requirements that we all need and use in everyday life. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Patrick. Really interesting and kind of eye-opening to see how you've gone through that journey so quickly, I think. We've got a little bit of time for questions, so please do put your questions in the comments chat and I'll pick those up with Patrick. And we've got one in from Kelly to kick us off. Do you only use open source for pharmacy data, or do you use it for your full ledger?
At the moment, it's just for our pharmacy. It is. I think the point we're trying to make, though, it's not limited by the number of transactions or scale. It's scalable up. So in the talk, there are organisations that are using this have got 300,000 plus employees. It's scalable to that degree. So you're not limited in terms of its functionality or features or size. We just happen to use it for our pharmacy solution.
Excellent. And did you? I think you mentioned you're thinking about using it for other things. What's next? What lends itself best to it that you're starting to explore, I guess?
Well, at the moment, I think I mentioned that we had the e-rostering requirement. We developed a proof of concept for that. For us personally, at the moment in the Royal Marsden, we've paused a lot of the developments because we were actually going through a digital health record implementation. So opportunities for new developments are limited. But for me personally, and looking at the things that we do in the organisation, I think project accounting would be one of the really good ones. that we could get in there, because we have a large PMO, and I think we're a great opportunity. But the opportunities are endless. If you look at what because it is an ERP, it's not just an accounting platform. It does end to end, from procurement through to human resources and recruitment, through to projects. Yeah, I mean, it's endless.
Yeah, thank you. And I think a couple of the questions that are coming through, recognizing what a brilliant proposition it is, and thinking about some of the risks and governance type of things around that. I guess it almost sounds a bit too good to be true. So it's trying to understand where the pitfalls might be and how you've mitigated them. Because obviously for those people that have been through lengthy procurement processes that have taken a long time, and you mentioned only a few months, I think it's trying to understand how to mitigate any risks in there. But the first one, question has been asked about, are there any issues around data security that you've had to think about?
So data security, we'll push some of it off to my third party as to the actual infrastructure where it's held. But in terms of data and its security, all of the data centers in which it's held are all I can't remember what the actual term is. They're validated, they're secured. If you're talking about how we use data, so the actual data at rest is secured behind firewalls and all the usual good stuff that you would expect it to have. You can also, so let me just clarify this. You can have this as a cloud proposition. You can also put it on premises. So your security will depend upon which model you use from a data storage point of view. From a data usage point of view and access, so the system itself has access controls. So the same sort of role-based access that you would expect from any proprietary solution. So I'm not giving people access to unfettered data. Their data access will be secured by the role that they do. There's also a supervisory hierarchy. So in terms of putting in journals and data, if that's what you're talking about, that will also go through an approval hierarchy for before it actually gets consumed into the application. And I don't mean to be wishy-washy on the technical side of where the data resides. I think that's probably something that I would need my technical people to respond on, if that's possible, rather than me just saying how it's architected.
Brilliant. And I think from what you're saying as well, it seems like it would give you opportunities for sharing data across a wider group of providers, say in provider collaboratives or working more as systems. Is that something that you're starting to use more, or is it just at Royal Marsden at the moment?
So at the moment, it's just within Royal Marsden. I think what this as a project for me and as a concept is about, actually can we have an ecosystem of applications that are common to all of us that will enable us to operate seamlessly or interoperatively. So be that sharing of information around staff availability, pandemic, e-rostering, and being able to move them around organizations, or whether or not this is actually data sharing between an ICS or within your patch. I know we work closely with the Royal Brompton, and then there is data that moves between us. I'm not saying it's necessarily on a piece of A4 at the moment, but actually we do need a way of facilitating that data migration. Now, the thing that we've created at the moment doesn't do that because it's a standalone system. However, because it's an open source platform, there are ways in which we can then develop that feature and that functionality to share data in a secure manner. Yes.
Brilliant, thank you. Excuse me. Got a specific question, actually, a good one around some of the accuracy of the information in there, I suppose. So someone's saying, for example, the automated VAT return you referred to, how accurate have you found the application to be? Do you know of any validation HMRC queries in areas where rules have been incorrectly applied or contracts or invoice issues have raised? How confident are you that it would pick up any validation errors in the same way any other system would?
Yeah, pretty confident. We went through a very comprehensive testing process with HMRC in developing it, and absolutely, we at first went through a series of iterative code changes where there were validation errors, until such point that we got to a stable proposition. From the point of view of am I confident in the file being transferred correctly? Yes, within the actual file transfer protocol itself, there are internal validation checks on the totals, the row counts, and the data itself as to what we send and what's received back, and we get a validation report also on that basis.
Brilliant, thank you.
If there's anything specific that's more financy, then please let me know, and I'll get my finance people to answer you. But yeah, from the protocol, I'm very confident in, and it's been used for the last 2 years, and we've not had any real issues.
Excellent. And I guess thinking about the finance audience that will be primarily watching this at the moment, how have you gone about getting finance involved and finance's role, particularly thinking about what skills you might need? Because I think from my point of view, it sounds fantastic, and I would worry that I didn't have the technical skills and I would break something or I'd do something wrong. And I suspect there are lots of finance professionals out there that would feel like they need a bit more training and a bit more upskilling. Have you got any advice on what you've done at the Royal Marsden?
So from a point of view of using the system, when we created it, I didn't mention it in the presentation, but what I did ask for was a series of training videos for different responsibilities. So I'm a junior accountant, or I'm the CFO, or I'm and then by feature. So I need to do a payment run. I need to interface that into my banking system. I need to upload a journal. I need the usual types of things that you would anticipate. I've got to close down month end. I've got to close down the subledgers. I've got to close down month end. I need to produce my schedules at month end. So there is a suite of training that also was created that is not interactive, but it's videos. So there's that. In terms of the system itself, what I would say, you could take this 2 different ways. There's positive and there's negative to this. Odoo itself and the application is hugely intuitive, which is brilliant. It's also very accessible. So it means you can press a lot of things. So to your point, Lisa, I might do something that I might regret. So we've limited that to an extent because, as I said, we've got role-based access controls within there. So depending upon your role, you'll only get access to certain features. So you're not allowed to just run rampant throughout the system. So your level of access and what you can control is limited. But again, yes, you might commit a journal you don't mean to. Well, one wonderful thing I quite like about the system that we created is there is a very simple rollback process to almost anything you do. And I've committed that journal. I just want to undo it. You just press undo and it will reverse it out. So yes, in terms of breaking, you can do things that you probably wish you hadn't have done, but it's very, very, very simple to unwind them. That's not to say, I wouldn't take advice from someone that's used it. And again, either insight from myself or my accountants or from Opus, who we worked with very closely on this. They'll know it inside out. And so I wouldn't worry about breaking it. I really wouldn't worry about breaking it. Not only that, but we keep backups of our environment. So even if you really do something, Lisa, that's catastrophic, we've got DR and business continuity process in place and the ability to restore our system nightly.
Brilliant. And I think you mentioned as well, when you started, this is the first time you've kind of tested that open source as a bit of proof in concept. Thinking about what the audience could take away today, what would be your top couple of tips or takeaways if you were starting again? What would you kind of advice would you give yourself to people who are starting it now?
Well, don't be scared of it. I really wouldn't. I would see it as a real opportunity. Remember that if you're starting this from scratch, it's different to buying something off the shelf. You are going through, in effect, software development. You will need to be prepared when you're starting a project to test, retest, and test again, because what you're actually doing is creating features and functionality that hasn't gone through perhaps all the R&D that when you pick something off the shelf. The core is there, but any additional features and functionality, you need to be prepared that you're going to go through repeated testing cycles. So it's slightly different. It's not just implementing it and going through a normal project phase. You are doing software development alongside developers, if that's what you're doing. That's certainly what we had to do. If you were to take this product, you don't need to do that. We've done it for you. But if you were to develop any additional modules, or if you were to embark on an open source product yourself, a project yourself, remember that it is primarily about software development. And be prepared for that, and be prepared to get your people, well, it's like any project, get your people engaged. They are key to any successful project. They need to be confident that what the product delivers is what they want. But the beauty is that it can deliver exactly what you want because it's bespokeable. The code is changeable, and therefore you will get exactly what you want, not necessarily something that sort of works. So that would be my key learning from this, and it was
Yeah, really, really helpful, Patrick. And I think the slide that you showed us about kind of what your goals were at the beginning and how it delivered against those is something we don't always necessarily do well. Is check well, we'd start the project and then it runs. So I think it's really nice to kind of measure it against that. So a good point to leave us on, I think. So I'm going to wrap us up now. I'm conscious we're just running out of time. I want to say a massive thank you to Patrick. I found that really interesting. I will certainly find out more, and I'm sure that you'll have lots of the audience in touch with you, Patrick, to pick your brain a little bit more. Thank you to those of you that asked questions and got involved in the workshop. That's all of the sessions for today. So hopefully we'll see many of you again tomorrow for the next day of conference. Thanks very much. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, everyone. See you tomorrow.